Hello, Tom again. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at one of the built-in um, generic collection types that's in .NET. Specifically, it's a generic list. Before we get into the generic list, though, we're just going to look at the array list and how that works, and we'll contrast it against this generic list that we can create. So I'm in my program.cs and I'm looking at the static method called part2list_t. You'll notice there's a number of comments. So we're just going to go through and all the coding for this video will actually occur in this spot. So what I want to do is I want to create a collection of grades. I'm going to have the user actually enter in a certain number of grades. We'll say 3 grades for some students. And then we'll just add them to a list and maybe we'll do something simple like output them to the screen. Okay, fairly simple, straightforward stuff. So we'll start off with some declarations. So I've defined a constant called grades, the number of grades to store, which I'll set at 3. Maximum score, I've just arbitrarily set it to 99. I just want to be able to see some fractions in my percentages, that's all. An integer for the user input when I'm going to ask them for the score. That's once I convert it, that's what it'll go into. And then I also have a student counter, which will just go from one student to the next type of thing. So the actual object that I'll use to represent my collection, I'll start off with what we already know, which is an array list. Okay, so I'm going to create an array list. I'll call it grade list. And I'll make it equal to an empty array list. So what does the array list store? It stores a collection of just objects. So I can store grade objects in an array list using subtyping. Okay, so there's polymorphism getting involved. I can do that kind of thing. So let's go through and code a useful little program here. I'll go through a for loop for 3 students. Okay, so my student counter starts off at 0. While it's less than grades, I'm going to increase the student counter by 1 each time. I should probably indent these comments that go with that. Well, those are all part of the for loop, and I'll close off my for loop here. Okay. Prompt the user to enter the score stored in store the user input. Let's do that. Pretty straightforward. Okay, and of course, if this doesn't parse, it'll throw an exception. I've got a catch block in my main method, so that's where I'll actually see that. It's not a very good type validation, but it'll do. Let's do some basic domain validation as well. So I'll just put a little if else, and what I'm talking about there is just making sure that the actual score the user entered in is not too high. Okay. So if the input score is bigger than 99, make it equal to 99. Otherwise, if it's less than 0, make it equal to 0. Okay, so again, I'm not reprompting the user or anything along those lines. I'm just adjusting the score appropriately. And then finally, I need to add the grade to the array list. So I'm going to take my grade list, which is my array list, dot add. Okay, so it's expecting an object here. All right, so the type of object that I will actually add is a new grade, and it helps if I spell that correctly. And that grade, I'm going to use the dual parameter version, so it'll be input score, and it'll be max score as well. Okay. All right, so there's my input loop. Okay, I'm going to just ignore this oops comment for now. I want to display the grades as entered. I'll tell the user that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set the student counter that I had before. I'm going to set it to 0 because I'm going to be using a for each loop to show each of the grades. So I'm going to use that student counter in the actual for each loop just for formatting purposes. Okay, so for each object grade, because that's what's in my grade list. Okay, so for every object that's in the grade list, I'm calling it grade. I want to write, my student counter after I've incremented it by 1, so it'll be 1, 2, 3. followed by the actual grade. So of course I have to either typecast or use the as operator on the actual object because it's not a grade yet, right? So I'm unboxing it. Well, not really unboxing it. I mean, it's an object to an object, but at any rate, yeah, I'm converting it back into an actual grade from an object. I might have got away with not doing that, to be frank, because polymorphism would take care of it. But I wanted to be explicit about it for at least for the demonstration. So let's try this out. So I'll save this and we'll run it. Okay, so I'm going to do option 2 this time. And let's say this isn't about data input validation, so I'll just put in some valid values there. And we can see it, everything worked okay. So, an array list is perfectly fine for this application, sort of, but we can make mistakes with it. Here's the problem. So I'm going to go back up in my function here where the comment says, oops, accidentally added something to the grade list that wasn't a grade. So let's do that. We'll simulate this mistake. So I'm going to take my grade list. I'm going to add a string. I'm being a little cheeky here. I'm saying something isn't a grade. And the array list will be fine with this because what the array list is storing, grade list is actually storing, is objects. And it can treat a string like an object the same way it can treat a grade. So there's no errors, no warnings. Okay, if I go to build this, it's not complaining at all. But when I go ahead and run it, okay, based on the way I have it coded, so I'm getting a null reference exception. So why am I getting that exception? I'll just close this off. And I'm getting the exception here because when I convert the object coming out as a grade, a string can't be converted to a grade. Since I'm using the as operator, it's making grade null. Null to string gives me an invalid operation. A lot of things going on there. Okay. So that gives me exception. Obviously, if I wasn't doing this part, and I could take the brackets off too, but whatever. I'll do the same kind of thing. Okay, I can see that fourth object on there. Polymorphically, it's dealing with it okay, but I don't want this to happen. I want my list to be strongly typed. So in the previous tutorial, what we did is we created our own strongly typed collection class using collection base, inheriting from collection base to do this. Another option we have is using the built-in generic collection types, and I'll show you the difference between an array list and specifically a list at this point. All right, I'm just going to undo that. So I'm keeping it as a grade. I want the mistake to be obvious, if you will. Up at the top here where I created the array list called grade list in the first place, I'm going to comment that out because what I want instead is to create a generic list. All right, so I'm going to use the list. By the way, I should scroll up to the top here for a quick second. In order to be able to use this, I'm using system.collections.generic. This is where the generic list and the generic dictionary are actually defined. This is not one of the usings I think that automatically comes up, or maybe it is. I have to think about that now. But at any rate, I'm just make sure that you have that if this is not working for you. All right, so yes, I've taken out the array list. I've replaced it with a list. And then in the greater than less than brackets, it's a list of what? And in this case, I'm saying I want a list of grades. And I'm making it a new empty list. So now this is strongly typed, which means that this grade list will not accept anything that isn't a grade, or at least derived from grade. Okay, so when I scroll down, you'll notice I've actually got an error now when I'm trying to add something that isn't a grade. Okay, so array list was okay with this, but list grade is not going to be okay with this, so I have to take that out. All right, so this is probably more what I want. I want my accidents to come up as compile errors at compile time rather than at runtime. So I take that out, and obviously I run this. It was able to pick up the error, so I shouldn't have an error when I run it this time. Okay, so you can see the grades as entered is you know, perfectly what we expect. All right, so that's using a generic list. Certainly a viable option. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll do a similar kind of thing, but we'll use a generic dictionary. Thank you very much.